if you don't have a personal take on your topic, why write a book at all? If you're just, grabbing a bunch of information from different sources and putting it all together, there's some value to that because, you're shortening people's research process, I suppose. But, the real value is in what is it? How do you look at this topic? I want to know, you're the expert. You know something that I don't know, like share that with me, and that all goes back to the personality and the voice, and figuring out what all of that looks like.
You're listening to Honey and Hustle, a video podcast that inspires the dreamers, creators, and hustlers to make a business from their passions. I'm Angela Hollowell, and I'm a visual storyteller based in Durham, North Carolina. I sit down with creative entrepreneurs, nonprofit founders, and small business owners as they share their stories, the lessons they've learned throughout their careers, and how they've worked to make a positive impact.
Hey everyone, my name is Angela Hollowell. I'm the host of Honey and Hustle, and today I am here with Emily Crookston, who is, as we know, the Pocket PhD, but she is so much more than that. Emily, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks, Angela. Excited to be here. Yeah.
Absolutely. So as people have probably noticed, the term PhD does not come lightly. And in my experience in grad school, and that's at the master's level, PhD level, anything, one of the biggest accomplishments is having your name in the credits on a paper, right? On a published article. But now you've made the transition to say, I don't care about any of that, actually. I don't want my name anywhere. I just want to help other people. I would rather be a ghostwriter. How did you go from being the person who's authoring scholarly articles to now saying I don't want to do any of that. I want to just put other people first?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it and a great question. I would say, so I was a philosophy professor. I taught for about 7 years. I was on the job market for all 7 of those years. And it was a real grind for anybody who's ever been on the academic job market or knows anything about how academia works. There are way more PhDs than, jobs, or at least good jobs out there. And especially in the humanities, it is rough to be on the job market. And so, I went through my own little, story around academia and difficult times. I could tell some war stories or whatever. But it was, I just, at a certain point, I just said, okay, I need to get out. I'm going to give myself a year to figure out what I want to do. Because I literally hadn't thought about what I would do besides teach philosophy. Basically since I was 18 years old. And so I said, well, I think I like marketing. I think marketing is kind of cool. Really, literally not knowing anything about marketing and what it entails. But a friend of a friend was looking for marketing help, and she got on the phone with me for my interview and basically gave me the lay of the land around marketing, which I really appreciated. But I started writing blog posts for her, and she had clients who needed blog posts. She runs a web development and marketing company. And so I was really starting out ghost blogging. I didn't know what that was. I didn't really call it that in the beginning. To me, it was just doing marketing. It hadn't really occurred to me that ghostwriting was its own separate thing. But several months in, someone called me a ghostwriter, and I said, "Oh, that's what I'm doing." And not having credit, to me, I've never really felt like, oh, this person is stealing my ideas, or, oh, I'm giving away, I'm giving away my ideas or something like that. Because the people that I work with, to do a really good job ghostwriting, it's a really collaborative process. They bring their ideas to the table. I write them, it's almost like a mind meld. And, I don't ever feel like, oh, I wish I had credit for that, because it's not in my industry. It's not, it's not usually a topic I know anything about. I'm really an amateur, which I think helps me to write well, because I'm kind of in the position of being their reader, their target reader. So I really like the collaborative side of the whole thing. And, and I get compensated well. So that also makes it feel better than, academia, where you're spending hours and hours writing a paper that maybe 5 people read. At least the work that I help get out into the world gets read by bigger audiences, which makes me feel good.
That's awesome. So I want to dive into two separate things that
Yeah.
you talked about, which again, when I think of writing or professional writers, I think of pretty much a solo person, somebody who wakes up, has maybe a writing routine of some sort, whether they're working for themselves or working for other people, but somebody that has a writing routine, they're largely just like sipping their coffee, getting some morning light, you know,
Hopefully. Yeah.
you know, write in their leather-bound journal for a set amount of time, and then they go back and edit it at another time. And then maybe they have the client look over it and give edits or revisions, and then they're pretty much good to go and they're on to the next piece, however long that takes. But you're saying it's a little less like that. It's a little less solitary. And so that's interesting. How did you work through that collaborative process during the pandemic, which is now where you're like, has it always been a virtual process for you, or like what has that been like?
Yeah, yeah. I've had a few local clients, people who were local to me and I worked with, which is fun. I love that. And I've had a couple of ghostwriting clients who I was working with virtually, but they wanted to do an in-person day, or they'd come for a weekend and we'd work together or something like that. And that's always fun and cool. There's a lot to be said for being in the room with a person and, learning their personality, and people just open up a lot more when there's not a screen between between you and them. So that can be a really nice part of the process. But most of the time I am working virtually with people. And they are the subject matter experts. I'm really interviewing them and getting their information. In fact, if I'm not getting enough information from a client, it can be a real struggle sometimes. It's like, well, now I'm just writing what I'm finding online. I'm not much better than AI at this point, unless you give me your personal take on this issue. That's what everyone wants to hear. They don't want to hear the generic information that they can find by Googling. They want to hear your opinion. So usually when I put it to clients in that way, it makes a lot of sense to them. And I think it really puts their minds at ease, because I think a lot of people worry about hiring a ghostwriter, wondering how I'm going to capture their voice, wondering if it's going to feel like theirs, if they're going to be able to own it in the end. And I think those are really great questions to ask. um, if you're thinking about hiring a ghostwriter. But that's how I get around those kinds of concerns. It is your work, because you're feeding me ideas and I'm just expanding on them and using them to build the piece, along with some research, no doubt. In most cases, with the books, at least there's a lot of research involved. But it's also, I found this piece of information. What do you think about it? Does it work? Do you agree with this opinion in this article? Do you want to include it in the book? These kinds of questions. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's super, super needed when we talk about how AI and things like that are going to continue to shape the creative landscape going forward. There obviously there's always going to be those people like, yeah, it's gonna take my job. And I'm like, I don't know if it's that deep. Because
Right.
again, like when it comes to injecting personality and getting these like firsthand accounts of stories that aren't already available on the internet, there's going to be a gap between what AI can provide and what a human needs to provide in order to make this something people, one, actually want to read,
Right.
and two, something that actually sounds like the person wrote it, right?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And and so just like I would love to hear your take on injecting personality, right? Because again, it is just as much their voice as it is your interpretation of their voice.
Mhm.
So, and I know that's like a philosophical thing. Is this one? No, it's an interpretation of one. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
is that your
yeah, yeah.
philosophical approach to ghostwriting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, personality is so important, I mean, that if you don't have a personal take on your topic, why write a book at all? If you're just, grabbing a bunch of information from different sources and putting it all together, there's some value to that, because you're shortening people's research process, I suppose. But the real value is in, what is it? How do you look at this topic? I want to know, you're the expert. You know something that I don't know. Like, share that with me, and that all goes back to the personality and the voice, and figuring out what all of that looks like. But the other piece of it is that I think piece where a ghostwriter can really be helpful is, I have a lot of distance from what we're writing. And I can sort of look at it and say, what here does your audience really need to hear or want to hear? So then I can kind of tailor, the direction of the conversation can go where you might not take it, because that's, what I'm seeing. And from my expertise that I bring in, well, I know what audiences what would resonate with your audience. I have ideas about that. And, I can kind of steer things in that direction. And I think that that's really helpful. I'm working on my own book right now, and I really wish I had a me outside of my own head to help me figure out, like, what parts do I really need? What does my audience really want to hear from me? And luckily I have a good friend who's saying, this is what you do. This is your superpower. Like, this is your thing to talk about, and I'm like, yeah, okay, got it. I can go with that. So I think it's really important when you're writing a book to think about, what is the superpower? What's different about your book from every other ghostwriter or every other consultant? Whatever it is that you're working on. But a lot of the time, you can go with your system. You can give people an inside look into your system and methodology. And I think sometimes people worry that they're giving away too much, and why would someone work with me if they can just buy the book? And I think, people are going to read your system and your methodology, and they're going to say, oh, she knows a lot more than I do about this. There's no way I could do this myself. I think that's the more typical reaction than, oh, awesome, I have a roadmap now. I can do this all myself. We're all looking for ways to outsource all kinds of things if we can. And why wouldn't you hire the expert if you had that option?
Yeah. And I think, honestly, either way, the person benefits, right? If they have a roadmap and they're like, oh, I got some value out of this, aren't they more likely to tell someone else and share that with someone else who may be looking for it? And then if they're like, oh, wow, I got an introduction, I learned something, now I'm ready for more and to dive deeper because I feel educated about the topic and I know what to ask for now from this subject matter expert. I'm ready to dive deeper, maybe, invest a little bit more. You still win. Either way, you win,
Agreed.
And I think sometimes, like, we look at, and this is myself included, like, if I make a masterclass, if I make a video course, if I make a digital product, or if I write a tweet thread that gives away my process for something, or YouTube video, whatever, am I giving away too much? Like, are people gonna just like get it, leave it, never want to have anything else to do with me, right? But, we really have to frame it as like, what would a win-win look like for your audience, right? Mm-hmm. And that's in any industry, in any way, like, what does a win-win look like for them, and how can I provide that in a way that feels authentic to me, right? Because that's essentially like where we're going. Even if you're outsourcing certain parts of your business or certain parts of your creative process, you still want it to look, feel, sound like you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when we talk about, just like injecting personality and having a take, and like, I think sometimes, again, I wouldn't even say extreme, but to the reality that people were like, oh, I'm going to get noticed more, but the more controversial my take is. But that doesn't have to be the case more often than not. It can just be like something that has been accepted in an industry that you're bucking the system on, right? Mm-hmm. That really, like the 4-day work week. That's not necessarily like hurting anybody's feelings if you work 4 days a week, but it is a buck to like the traditional work week system. And so that's like an opinion that can get you far. Like, how have you talked clients through it? And like, clients can be anyone, right? It can be like thought leaders, it can be entrepreneurs, it can be, business owners, anybody. Like, how have you talked people through like how to develop an opinion that you can translate in your marketing?
Yeah. This is something I've been thinking a lot about lately because, if you want to be a thought leader, you're absolutely right. You could share the best practices. You can share any kind of educational content to help your clients. But if you're only sharing the surface level stuff, if you're sharing the stuff that every other person in your industry is sharing, you're really not going to stand out. You're really just not going to grab people's attention. They might read your post and say, yeah, okay, I get it. Or write down your 5 tips. They might even save your post, right? But if a person's on the fence about working with you, you have to think, is this post going to push them off the fence? Probably not. They're going to say, oh, that's good information. Write it down. They might think about it later, but they're not going to be moved to work with you. And the thing is, like, you're absolutely right. Like, controversial sounds scary. Oh, I've got to write a controversial post, or I say polarizing. You really should polarize your audience. But what I mean by that is you want to get them to make a decision about you. And that could be good or bad. They might say, oh, I'll never work with that person. Or, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. I wonder if I agree. Right now you've got them. Now they're paying attention. And now they're probably going to look for you later in the feed, right? They're going to remember, oh, this person is saying some really interesting things. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be politics. You don't have to talk about religion to be polarizing or controversial. You just have to be different from the norm in your field, or different from, what everyone else is saying on LinkedIn. That's exactly why, the 4-day work week became this kind of craze, or quiet quitting became this kind of craze, because they were saying the thing that other people weren't saying, but it resonated, right? People understood it. That's the thing you kind of want to figure out, and I really like the question, if someone is on the fence about working with me, what would shift them off the fence? Right. And thinking about that question before you start writing your posts on LinkedIn or creating your blog or whatever it is, whatever kind of content you're working on. But yeah, it's scary. And I want to acknowledge that it can be scary to share those kinds of ideas, the thing, that thing that, deep down in your gut that you've always wanted to share, but you're never quite sure how to say it, or you just haven't been bold enough to say it. Put it out there and see what happens. That's kind of my biggest piece of advice, just dance along the edge of your comfort zone for a minute, see once you see that the world doesn't fall apart, I think it gets a little bit easier to share those kinds of things. And those are really what will make a difference. That's what will get people to, start conversations with you in the comments on LinkedIn, or, that's what will get more post impressions, like all of that. It really is about the content. I can sit here and tell you all kinds of tactical tips about, you need to be consistent on LinkedIn. You need to have a consistent message, all that stuff. But really what it comes down to, if you really want to go far and be a thought leader, it's about putting out that personality, putting out the stuff that's unique to you in some way. And, there's lots of people who will say nothing unique has ever been written, and there's nothing, no one ever writes anything unique anymore. Everything anyone wants to say has already been said, these kinds of things. But I think, that's not true, for the moment, for the place where we're at, there are ways to, be unique and stand out. And that's really what it's about. It's not about reinventing the wheel or, inventing anything. It's just about your take. People are curious about what you think, and leaning into that kind of, place with it.
This episode was recorded using Riverside. Riverside is an incredible video recording and live streaming tool for video podcasters and video creators. With the ability to record videos up to 4K resolution, all participants have access to active local backups, which make poor internet connections and lagging audio a thing of the past. If you're ready to upgrade the audio and video quality of your show, please be sure to check out the link in the description to experience Riverside for yourself. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, I think again, going back to what we are currently accepting as the norm in this era of building a personal brand, right? That grows your business, if you will. I think that's everybody's, goals. Like, how can I be unique? How can I be unique? Right. And sometimes they forget anything rational to do with their industry. And they're like, how can I be polarizing? Get, these certain number of people here, which and some of us yeah, you've helped people make a decision about you, but is it the decision you really want them to make in the long term? Is that really what you want associated with your name? Is that the most important thing about you, or for someone to know about you if they want to work with you? And I think I love this quote from Cornell West, which was everything that is new and nuanced is built on something previous, right? Anything that you're adding to the conversation, again, is an addition. It's not you're creating a new conversation, or that you need to create a whole new conversation. And again, in this pursuit of nuance and novelty, sometimes we forget that, maybe we need to obviously like showcase education of the basics, why they are there, and then show why like we're building something in addition to that,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's a really good point too. I'm not talking about being unprofessional in any way. Yeah, think about posts that go viral. Sometimes they go viral for bad reasons, right? You do not want your post to go viral in some cases. Like if you're the CEO crying because you had to let some people go, that's just not a good look, right? For a lot of reasons, that's not a good look. And so, yeah, that's exactly right. That's not what I'm talking about. But absolutely, yeah, I love that. Putting your spin on something that's already been said or something that makes sense to people. You absolutely want to start from that common ground. Because if you're too far out there, people are gonna be like, what? So they're not gonna get it. So yeah, finding that happy balance that again helps people kind of make a decision about you, I think is where you want to be. That's the sweet spot. Mhm.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So going back to something you said that I think is really important, right? Which is what is your superpower and helping people define their superpower. Sometimes we don't define it. Sometimes other people, like we put ourselves out there and then other people start to come to us and tell us what resonates with them, right? I think that has been my way to find my like differentiator or like unique value proposition, whatever you want to call it. There's like tons of, terms.
Yeah.
But, I think sometimes again, in this pursuit of like finding your niche, right? We get so caught up in what we think is the right thing to do and what we think people want to see from us that we don't allow ourselves to really just like be ourselves to begin with, like just be human and to express ourselves and to, express our opinions and see what resonates with people and then double down on that, right?
Yeah.
So there is this inherent, you know, I guess maybe pseudo pressure, but pressure nonetheless to just like find your topic, find your superpower, stick to it, hone in on that, and I think like for the people who ascribe to that strictly, they get burnt out on that because they're like, well, there's more to me than that. And I haven't really, because I focus so much on this one topic, I haven't figured out how to inject other parts of my personality into this and
Yeah.
not only let people know what I'm good at and what I know and what I'm an expert at, but who I am now too, like in addition to that, and what about me lends itself to this industry or this field that I'm in. So for people who are coming to you and you're like, hey, I want to write a book, or hey, I want to grow my brand on LinkedIn. And you're saying, okay, like what are, some of the things you want to talk about? How are, we gonna make this unique to you so you can still own this? And you're like, oh, well, I write about this one thing.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe they write about, maternal and child health, but
Right.
never talk about the fact that they're a mother. Never, you
Right.
know what I mean? Like, there's some
Yeah.
gaps there, right? So like,
Yeah.
yeah, so like, how do we bridge that gap for people who are like, I want to put myself out there. I want to put my unique opinions out there, but I don't want to maybe put my personal life out there. Or I don't know how to do it in a way that feels right to me.
Yes, that's a really, really good question. And I say this to clients all the time, we're not going to post something that makes you super uncomfortable. As much as we might want you to post about this thing, if it's off limits, it's off limits. Like that's, we all are allowed to choose our boundaries around that stuff. But I think you're right that a lot of people think, oh, I can only post about one thing and I have to put on this persona and I have to stand there and make sure that people know that I'm an expert. And what that means is I can never talk about my struggles or I can never talk about my personal, reason for being here and why, I have to be kind of, the standoffish expert, if I want to really grow my brand. And I think that that's just simply not true. People want to know about the founders of companies these days. They want to hear about your kids. They want to hear about, how you do what you do. And a big part of that is, you work out every day or, whatever it is. Like there are people who want to know, how do you do the thing you do, Angela? Like, what is it that makes this happen? What's the secret to being you, And sometimes that's a very personal thing. In depending on, I don't know about you, but depending on my mood, sometimes people ask me that question, and yeah, I'm like, well, actually, it's because I had a big breakfast this morning, and that's really important to me, and I make sure that I make time for that, and I can't get up before 7 o'clock. I'm sorry, I'm not a 4 a.m. hustler. Like, that's not my thing. I need sleep, and it just helps me to work better, and I'm more efficient during the day when I sleep. So, there's all these things that you can share, and you can share them in a way, I think, that allows you to be as vulnerable as feels good to you. You don't have to share it in the same way your friend does, or, the people who are always posting selfies or something like that. I think it's actually better to post the personal stuff rarely, because then people are really like, oh, that's interesting. She doesn't usually post stuff like that, so this must be really important. People make those kinds of connections, and oh, I never see her face, and look, she's posting a selfie, so I'm going to read this post, that kind of thing. People go through it. And, I say I'm a big proponent of being experimental, because you're absolutely right. You will burn out if you're like, okay, I've got this strategy, and I'm just going to stick to it until the cows come home, and it's like, yeah, but in about 3 months, I would give it 3 months, you're gonna be burned out, and you're gonna be sick of it. You're gonna be sick of talking about the same thing, and you're gonna say, I have nothing more to say about this. Then I say, go and repurpose some stuff. That's my first piece of advice, because people can repurpose way more than they do. But also try what would make this fun and exciting for you again? Like, what would make it more fun? And if it's, well, I want to post about this new project I'm working on, why not? That's great. It's nice if it connects up with the stuff that you're doing now. So you look for those connections that you can bring in. But you don't have to stick to just one thing all the time. I mean, I know that that's sort of the conventional wisdom and advice, but for me, that doesn't work. I will get burned out. So I've got to figure out ways to make it fun for me. And one of the things I think makes LinkedIn fun in particular is connecting with people and starting conversations. So that's what I'm always thinking about when I'm writing. I'm like, what will start a conversation? Who will comment on this? That kind of a thing. Because then it's like, now people are engaging with you, and it's not just you anymore. It's not, all that pressure to be perfect, or to be, to say exactly the right thing in the right moment. That kind of falls away once you're in conversation with people. Now it's like real, and that's where we want to be. That's the authenticity that everyone's looking for.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing about LinkedIn, especially for creators, a lot of creators don't like to use LinkedIn. And, I maybe haven't been doing the best job about preaching the gospel of LinkedIn, but basically, like, my thing is, a lot of creators are like, I don't get it. Like, I'm not a professional anymore. Like, I don't want to be forced to stick in these like rigid, whatever, I want to post my art. I want to post what I'm working on. And there's space for that.
Absolutely.
Obviously, there are some creators that are doing absolutely incredible on LinkedIn, posting and being vulnerable about their process and, what they're going through as a creator, and sharing their work, like doing a really big mix. And I think too, sometimes we get in these modes where like, well, I have to post this, in order to do this. And that's the only type of stuff I can post because that's what people care about on this platform. And it's like, well, not necessarily. Like, and you'll see that as you get more comments, especially for me, people are way more relaxed in the comments, right? And that's what you want. That's what you want, right? You want to get past that, like, online demeanor, online persona, where people are like, yeah, I hate this too, or yeah, I love this too, or
Right.
yeah, I've been thinking about this as well. Glad I'm not the only one, or like, get some thought provoking can happen, and I think that's beautiful. So
agreed. Yeah, it's first and foremost a networking platform. So if you would go to a networking event and share about your art or share whatever you're working on, like, great, then do it on LinkedIn. There are people who want to hear that. It might take time to find that community, but they're there. Yeah, I think everyone is on LinkedIn these days. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So just, I think this is a great question to end on, and it's really, again, going back to LinkedIn. Obviously, I know this isn't the only ghostwriting that you do. But going back to LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn is also unique in that it is built for mutual connections. It's not just like, the thing about following your followers versus connecting. That's like a new relatively new thing.
Yep.
It is still very much structured as if like I'm sending you a connection request in the hopes that you will also like want to be connected, not just like I'm following you for content
Right.
and like, I'm following you as a LinkedIn top voice or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
we are connecting with people we genuinely want to engage with, learn more about, all the share with all those types of things. And I hope that they continue to stay structured like that, because I think it also takes the pressure down of like, you know, why am I not performing as well? What does my follower count say about me? Like all these things that quite frankly, I think became a little more toxic on Instagram, right? Like, every time the algorithm changes, it's like people get upset because now they're feeling, dismayed that their content isn't hitting the right people, right?
Right.
And like, oh, I gotta do X, Y, Z to feed the algorithm to get my followers up, to get my engagement up. It's like this endless wheel,
Yeah.
right? Where people are just on, right? Versus
Right.
LinkedIn being more of like a casual, like walking,
Yeah. Yeah.
environment,
Right.
So like completely different. You're getting out of
Yeah.
the rat race and just kind of into this more slow
Yeah.
thing where you're not expected to churn out content. You're expected to move a little slower, be a little more meaningful, all these types of things that most people, quite frankly, aren't used to using social media for, which is
Yeah.
ironic.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So as a writer, when you're like, okay, I want to focus on, or I'm willing to focus on being a ghostwriter for someone's LinkedIn account, like what were some of the things that set LinkedIn apart for you? And for, again, people on the fence about posting on LinkedIn, what would
Yeah.
move them off the fence and maybe
Yeah.
make them interested in engaging on this network?
Yeah. It's great question and setup. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I also appreciate the way LinkedIn works. It's pretty much the only social media I could ever see using for my business. I have personal accounts on Instagram and Facebook, and I like to go there occasionally when I'm chilling, But with LinkedIn, it's where people go when they're looking for professional help. That is the first place they turn when they need a ghostwriter, when they need a writer, when they need a copywriter, like whatever it is, that's where they're going. They're going to look for people on LinkedIn because your profile shows them a lot more information than they could find through Googling you or maybe even going to your website in a lot of cases, because you have to right up front, your about section. You're talking about how you do your work, and just as a nice snapshot of the kind of work you do and who you are. So that's a really important tip. Like, make sure you use that valuable real estate. Even when people Google your first entry might be LinkedIn. Yeah. So people are going to come to LinkedIn, to find out about you. So that's one thing. It's a platform where people come to find leads, to find people that they can work with. So that's why I sort of made it my goal to start doing ghostwriting for people on LinkedIn as opposed to Instagram or anything else like that. I work with service providers mainly, and entrepreneurs, and that's where your people are. They're on LinkedIn. So if you're a creator and you're at all involved with looking for clients or trying to find clients, if you're a freelancer, like LinkedIn is just a gold mine for that kind of thing. And again, it's not hard to stand out. You can make a name for yourself, especially if you're in an industry where there's not a lot of people on LinkedIn. That's actually a great thing because you can really push the envelope and stand out. There aren't a lot of ghostwriters on LinkedIn. There's getting to be more, I would say, but I don't come across them every day. And so I know that I'm kind of in a place where I can, stand out and make myself known on LinkedIn. So I think that those are the big things. I'm with you on the way the platform works. I think, everyone complains about algorithms of social media all the time. That's like everyone's favorite hobby. And yeah, LinkedIn has its little quirks. Every so often my impression number will just take a nosedive and my clients will call me and say, "What's going on?" And I'll say, "Yeah, they changed something. They had to have done something, the algorithm, because I haven't changed a thing." So if you're being consistent, you can actually make those kinds of judgment calls, rather than, "Oh, I think it's just me." If you're being consistent about how you're using the platform, that gives you a lot of clues about what's happening with the algorithm. And it's not, it's still not great. It's, still not wonderful to lose impression numbers, but at least you can kind of say, "Oh, well, it's the algorithm," or, "Oh, okay, well, everybody's experiencing this," and kind of, relax about it maybe. Um, So, I think it's a really great networking platform. I love networking in general, which I'm surprised about because I'm actually really introverted. But if I get up in the right mood and I'm ready to network, I can I can do it. And I really like how LinkedIn gives me the opportunity to kind of network from my desk anytime, all day long, dipping the conversations and dip out. I love the way conversations kind of unfold in slow motion on LinkedIn. Like I can be a part of a conversation all day long and just checking back a couple times a day. And I think that that's really fun, like the thread of the conversation continues. Um, and I've met so many people, even, talking to them after, meeting them on LinkedIn. And people are so generous, and I feel like I have a really nice network of people who I can ask for things when I need them for my business. So, even more than the leads coming in, I think it's about the connections and the relationships that I'm building. And I don't see how I could build those relationships on another platform.
Yeah, that is extremely well said. And I mean, like, I am 1000% there with you as like a fellow introvert who's like, oh, I can still network and not leave my house. Like, this is great,
Right.
Like, one thing that I have said to people when people say, well, oh, you're only here for like, less than a year before the pandemic hit. And I'm like, yes, but after I figured out how to get to work without GPS, I went to networking events after work every day for 3 months,
Yeah.
right? So imagine like how long it took me to meet, let's say 500 people.
Right.
Now I can do that in like
Yeah.
half
Like a
the
couple
time.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and not leave my house,
Yeah.
not feel
Yes.
stressed about sitting in traffic
Yes.
after work. Like,
Or how do I
yeah,
look? How am I going to
yeah,
eat? Like, all these things. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
no,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
I
Can't
agree.
recommend it enough for that reason alone.
Right. Yeah, and I think the point about connections versus followers is also a really good one. I always connect with people because I want them to be able to see my content. So I rarely will follow people, but you're absolutely right that right by that connect button, it says, do you know this person? Like, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know this person, which everybody does, but I do appreciate that that's at least like part of the conversation on LinkedIn. Like you really should be connecting with people you want to have a relationship with, not just,
Yeah.
spam them with your info, I mean, I always say, imagine going to a networking event and just being like, buy my thing, like to everyone you meet, like buy this thing, that would never work, right? So you've got to kind of nurture people and, and build those relationships to get to business on LinkedIn. That's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing with me today, Emily. I really enjoyed it. I hope somebody out there who's on the fence about, LinkedIn and growing their professional network and just using their voice in a unique way online, got something from this. And I just really appreciate you sharing your experience with us.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Angela. I really enjoyed the conversation.